everybody, and welcome to the cleverly named Bernie Goldberg's No BS Zone with my good friend John Daly. John is unavailable this week, so Jesse Waters is sitting in for him. Jesse, I'm going to talk very slowly, Jesse, to make sure you follow everything that's going on today. How's it going, John?
I'm doing well. How about you, Bernie?
Well, I'm doing a lot better now. There's still no electricity, no water back in Asheville, but I'm doing okay. Thank you for asking. Before we get going with some of the hot topics of the day, I just want to clear something up, or want to get something off my chest. Several of you are asking admittedly legitimate questions that start with the premise that, Bernie, since you're not voting for either candidate, who do you think would be better? Who do you think would be a better candidate to protect American interests? Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? One of our subscribers, a smart guy, said, it's a simple question. Give me a simple answer. I'm not going to go into that. And the reason I'm not going into that is because it puts the burden on me to make a decision between two candidates that I don't want to be president. A little history. Like Ronald Reagan, who was a Democrat, I was a Democrat. I voted for Jimmy Carter 100 years ago. The Democratic Party, I didn't leave the Democratic Party left me. So I'm not voting for Kamala Harris. I'm not voting for Joe Biden. I wouldn't vote for any Democrat, modern day Democrat, because they don't represent my interests anymore. And frankly, a lot of them see me as some kind of enemy. And I'm not voting for Donald Trump for reasons I've gone into a million times, no need to go into again. Let me just say, if I didn't think he was fit for office before January 6th, and I didn't, January 6th would have been the clincher. But the reason I'm not going to answer the question, who do I think is better for America now that I have to choose, supposedly have to choose between Trump and Kamala Harris, the reason I'm not going to do that is because that puts the burden on me, and the burden belongs on you. Everybody who voted for Donald Trump in the primaries, you had a choice among a whole variety of voters. You could have picked Kamala Harris, you could have picked Chris Christie, you could have picked Ron DeSantis, you could have picked a half a dozen other people, but you chose the one candidate who will have the toughest time beating Kamala Harris. You think Kamala Harris, on her best days as a socialist, on her worst days as a communist, you think she will lead this country into wreck and ruin and destroy the United States of America, if I'm reading your posts correctly. And yet you choose Donald Trump when you have a choice to pick somebody who would have mopped the floor with her in the debate. Donald Trump lost the debate, no matter what some of you may think. He got clobbered. Chris Christie would have beaten her like a rag doll. Kamala Harris, Nikki Haley, the same thing. So please don't even attempt to put the burden on me to explain why I'm going to sit out the election and possibly hurt Donald Trump when you're the one who hurt the Republican chances of winning. The burden is on you, not on me. Said enough. I'm going to go to my good friend, John Daly, to tell me if I'm right, if I'm wrong, and what he thinks.
No, I totally get where you're coming from. I for every last few presidential elections now, I've made the remark that I feel like the primary voters have handed us two crap sandwiches. One that has ketchup, one that has mustard, and so you got to choose. You got to choose between these two. And by the way I look at it, I don't want to eat a crap sandwich. It doesn't matter to me.
Exactly.
So yeah. I mean, I shouldn't say it doesn't matter to me. It does matter to me who our leader is, obviously, but it's just I don't feel like I should have to choose between these two.
Yeah, I want to emphasize, as I did at the jump, it's a legitimate question. The people asking are asking a legitimate question, and for the most part, they're asking it politely. At least one of you says, Daly and you are two liberal hacks.
Yes.
So if you don't support Donald Trump, you're a liberal hack. So what does that make you if you support Donald Trump and the evil, the despicable Kamala Harris wins the election. What does that make you?
There you go. There you go. So our next topic, Bernie, is we have another October surprise. There was an unsealing of a new filing in the federal criminal case against Donald Trump having to do with Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election. In the brief, special counsel Jack Smith shared additional evidence. This particular indictment had already been refiled back in August, and the charges included defrauding the United States and obstruction of official proceeding. But things got delayed because of the Supreme Court presidential immunity ruling, which Trump had initiated. But anyway, right now, this delay it carried over till the end of September, and we're just now seeing what was in the changes. Bernie, you wrote your Monday column on this topic as far as what was learned from the filing. Would you like to present your thoughts again for those who didn't read it?
Yeah, I want to update my thinking. Last week when this report came out, I figured, boy, this is the October surprise. This could hurt Donald Trump. We knew a lot of the stuff that went on January 6th, but it's laid out in detail. What he said, what he did, how he instigated the mob that stormed the Capitol and all that. You know what, John? I don't think it matters. I don't think anything matters at this point. I think if it came out today that Donald Trump was a spy working for China or Russia, he wouldn't lose one Republican vote. And if it turned out that Kamala Harris isn't a citizen of the United States, that she's an alien from some outer galaxy and she's running for president to destroy the universe, I don't think that would matter to any Democrat. I don't think anything matters. Are there undecided voters? I think there's a certain kind of undecided voters. It's the kind of Republican who doesn't want to vote for Donald Trump, but doesn't know if he or she can bring himself to vote for Kamala Harris. That's where the indecision comes in. But if you're a voter who's undecided and you can't make up your mind between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump on the merits, on what they stand for, and by the way, I don't think anybody knows what Kamala Harris stands for, then you shouldn't be around sharp objects, because these are two very different people with very different personalities and different characters. If you're undecided, leave me alone. I don't even want to talk about it anymore. What I wrote in my column was that as much as any prosecutor, it's Donald Trump's own demons that may bring him down. I'm not a mental health therapist, so I'm not going to pretend to be one, and I'm not going to give any diagnosis. That would be wrong. I'm not going to do that. But he does so many things that are injurious to his own well-being, that hurt his own chances of winning. He says things that are so outrageous that his fans love it, but he has to appeal to more than his fans to win an election, and he's not doing it. And I just don't think, I think there's something wrong with him. What it is, I don't know. I'm not going to try to give it a name, but I think there's something wrong with him. And I think, to use the cliche, Donald Trump is his own worst enemy.
Now, some of our subscribers, I was reading the comments to that column that you wrote. A number of them seem to, and I've been seeing this for months, seem to believe that none of the legal cases against Trump are legitimate to begin with. So it's really people like Jack Smith who are defying. They say they're all political. That Jack Smith and the others are waging lawfare. Bernie, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, even I think some of them are political. I think the New York
The New
cases,
York one, yeah, the New York one.
the New York Manhattan case and the state of New York case are both political. Georgia, who knows? I mean, that's a close call. That may be political because the prosecutor's a partisan Democrat. But even if the Jack Smith case is political, even if Joe Biden is somehow mysteriously behind it and there's not a shred of evidence to support that, why does Donald Trump do the kinds of things that get him in that kind of trouble to begin with? I heard the speech he delivered on January 6th to a bunch of dopes. Was every single one of them a dope? No, let me be clear. 90% of them were dopes who believed that the election was rigged just the way he said it was, and he got them all riled up and they stormed the Capitol. Whether you want to call it an insurrection or a riot, I don't want to get into that either. But what they did was wrong and Donald Trump was behind it. So even if they're out to get him, even if you believe that, can you hold your boy Donald Trump to a little bit of blame for this? That he does things that get him so close to the edge that every now and then he's going to fall off? Is anything, for crying out loud, is anything his fault?
No, it's people need to. You talked about that speech on January 6th. That to me, that wasn't even the biggest part. I mean, that it was too late by the speech for me. It was the 2 weeks of lying and then inviting everybody to Washington on January 6th. The speech was sort of the icing on the cake, and people want to fast forward to 20 minutes into it where he says peacefully at some point is a lot of people have already left to act like that should cover his butt on that. But no, I think just in looking at these criminal investigations, people need to remember that they were all, well, not all of them, but most were in the works before Trump had ever announced he was running for re-election. Trump knew this was coming, and I think it was pretty clear that's why he announced as early as he did that he was running. It was so he could claim
Right.
that they're coming after him, based on political reasons. These efforts are designed to prevent him from becoming president again. And this is exactly, you brought up Chris Christie earlier. This is exactly what he kept warning Republicans about during the primary. Now we both agree, like I said, the New York case was political, but it's interesting when you go back and look at Jack Smith. He up until he prosecuted Donald Trump, he was not viewed as a political operative. Of course, he had taken on cases from both sides of the aisle, political leaders on both sides. He was the prosecutor against John Edwards. But as we know, anyone who works to hold Donald Trump accountable for anything, whether it's Cheney on the impeachment or whether it's any of these prosecutors, they are the villains, to the political right. And unfortunately, that's where we're at right now.
This gets back to the initial point before we move on to our last topic. It's the people who nominated such a wrecking ball because they love the fact that he was a wrecking ball. They love the fact that he was outrageous and that he was vulgar. Well, I don't know if they love the fact that he was vulgar, but it didn't hurt him. That he was crude, that he was a fighter. They loved all that. And that's what got him in trouble. And that's whatever you believe Jack Smith's motives are. Believe the worst of it. You can't hold Donald Trump accountable for anything. You'd rather hold me accountable for not voting for him. Be my freaking guest. But I'm blaming you, the people who voted for Donald Trump, when you had a choice to vote for a bunch of other people, for getting us into this mess where the next president of the United States may very well be Kamala Harris. The last topic is, how will Hurricane Helene affect the election, if at all? Now, Karl Rove is a very bright guy, and in the Wall Street Journal, he asked this question: what happens in North Carolina and Georgia if voters conclude that the Biden-Harris administration is mishandling the Hurricane Helene recovery? Well, you'd think the answer would be, if they think it's hurting the recovery, they're going to vote for Donald Trump. Well, let me tell you something. A lot of people are in no position to vote. Voting is the last thing on their mind. Trying to get out from under one of the worst storms in American history is what is concentrating their attention. So Karl Rove writes, the storm hit hard 3 North Carolina congressional districts in the far west of the state and 5 in the northernmost Georgia districts, get this, which are among the most Republican areas of these battlegrounds. So the hardest hit areas are Republican strongholds. Many voters there have been displaced, their homes and communities shattered. Karl Rove ends, how many will be unable to return home before Election Day? That's the question. This, in a very tight race where North Carolina is very tight one way or the other. And by the way, it shouldn't be. It's another Donald Trump issue. People who would normally vote Republican can't bring themselves to vote for Donald Trump. This hurricane may be a deciding factor, even at the margins, where people sit home or what remains of their home don't go down to the polls to vote, don't mail in absentee ballots because they didn't get them. And that could sway North Carolina and the whole election.
No, you bring up a good point with that. And I think people, we saw what happened to President Bush politically with Hurricane Katrina. It can definitely have a huge effect on a politician's popularity, even if some of the criticism back then was unfair. And I think Donald Trump and the Republicans clearly do see this as a political possibly a political game changer. There's been Trump's been spreading a lot of misinformation that people have been calling him out for, and tons of misinformation on social media too about the hurricane recovery. So I do think this is going to potentially be a big political thing.
Right. But see, a lot of people can't watch TV. A lot of people don't have internet. They can't go online they don't know what's going on. Now, while much of what Donald Trump said is incorrect about, FEMA not getting funds because other people, here's a situation that isn't totally crazy. The United States is spending billions upon billions to help people in foreign countries. And that may be good foreign policy. But when you need money in North Carolina for recovery, and you don't have a house, and you don't have a water, and you don't have electricity, and you hear that we're giving billions of dollars to Lebanon, let's say, or Ukraine for that matter, as legitimate as that may be, that could affect your thinking. And the Republicans are going to try to make the most of that. So while it's not legitimate to say funds are being diverted from FEMA to other things, there's only so much money available. And if some of it is going to Lebanon, less of it arguably would be going to North Carolina. Do you follow what I'm saying, John?
I do, and I would argue against that, but that's okay. It's a perception thing. I get why people would, and especially you got people like J.D. Vance and out there. He's always been sort of an anti-Ukraine guy, but they are pushing that narrative. He's been doing that with Social Security, with other things. Why are we giving money to Ukraine when this isn't fixed or this isn't fixed? And I get it, and that's a whole
it's an enticing it's a seductive argument.
Exactly. It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And just on the topic of hurricanes, before we wrap things up, Hurricane Milton, as of the time we're recording this, it hasn't hit Florida yet, so that's why we haven't said anything about it. We'll be keeping an eye on that for sure. But Bernie, that's probably a good place to wrap things up this week. Anything else you'd like to add?
I just want to thank everybody for weighing in and showing concern for my well-being. I really appreciate that. Thank you. And we'll see you next time, right, John?
That's right. Take care, everybody.